About 300 to 400 years after the scattering at Babel, when people chose pride over God, the Lord began to work through one man and his family. The story begins in Ur of the Chaldees, a city alive with trade and idols. Among its very civilized inhabitants were Abram, son of Terah, husband to Sarai, and uncle to Lot. It's there that the voice of the living God breaks through the silence of settled life. Go from your country, your kindred, and your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I will bless you. And through you, all families of the earth shall be blessed. So God's promise to Abram was in 3 parts. He would become the father of a great nation. His descendants would be as countless as the stars of heaven and the sand on the seashore. And that through his family, blessing would come to all nations of the earth. So with his wife, Sarai, Terah, and his nephew Lot, and their household, Abram traveled to Haran, where Terah died at the age of 205. After some years of trading and gaining great wealth, God led Abram, Sarai, and Lot onward into the land of Canaan. But soon after, a great famine occurred in Canaan. So Abram and his family went down into Egypt, afraid and uncertain, hiding Sarai's identity because she was very beautiful. When Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, saw how beautiful Sarai was, his officials praised her to him, and she was taken into Pharaoh's palace to become part of his household. This displeased God, so he sent great plagues on Egypt, and when Pharaoh found out about the deceit, the truth came to light. Abram was rebuked and sent away humbled, but wiser. Years later, when Abraham lived among the Philistines, King Abimelech also tried to take Sarai as his wife because Abraham had told everyone she was his sister. Yet once again God intervened, warning Abimelech in a dream and preserving Sarah's honor. Each trial proved that God's promises would not fail, and that Abraham's future rested in the Lord's care, not in the power of kings. Back in Canaan, Abram and Lot prosper until their herdsmen quarrel over pasture. Let there be no strife between us, Abram says. If you go left, I'll go right. Lot chose the lush plain of Jordan near Sodom, while Abram stayed in the hills of promise. Then the voice of God came to Abram again, as he raised his eyes to the boundless horizon set before him. All the land you see I give to you and your descendants forever. So there at the same place that God spoke to him, Abram builds another altar, a quiet act of worship in the dust of peace. Years have passed since Lot pitched his tents near Sodom, during which time the cities of the plain have grown rich and corrupt. Their prosperity draws envy from the east, where 4 mighty kings rule vast empires. War breaks out, and Sodom and Gomorrah are plundered, and Lot, Abram's nephew, is taken prisoner with his household and herds. Abram wastes no time. In the stillness of night, Abram arms 318 trained servants, men born in his own household. And under the cover of darkness, Abram divides his forces in a swift strategic strike, and the enemy, confident and unguarded, is thrown into panic. As the sun rises over the land, the dust of battle settles, the enemy is destroyed, and Abram returns to Canaan with Lot and all his goods, unaware that his greatest blessing awaits beyond the valley. At the valley of Shaveh, known as the King's Valley, 2 rulers come out to meet him. One is Bera, king of Sodom. Still proud despite his city's shame, he stepped forward to greet Abram saying, "Give me the people, and take the goods for yourself." Abram's eyes harden with resolve. "I have lifted my hand to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take even a thread or sandal strap, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich." The other is a figure unlike any Abram has ever met, Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of God Most High. Melchizedek brings bread and wine not as tribute, but as blessing. His presence is calm, his voice deep with authority and peace. He lifts his hands toward heaven and speaks. Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Abram bows, receiving the blessing as one who knows the voice of truth. From the plunder of the battle, he takes 1/10 of all the goods and gives it to the priest. An offering of gratitude, not obligation. A quiet foreshadowing of the greater priest and king, Jesus, who would one day bless all nations. But there was a problem. Abraham and his wife Sarai had no children, and the years passed by. One night beneath the stars, Abram sought God in prayer. "Lord, what will you give me, seeing I remain childless?" God replies, "Look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. So shall your offspring be." And as we are told in Genesis 15 verse 6, Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Years pass. The promise lingers unfulfilled. Sarai's hope wanes, and she says, "Perhaps I shall obtain children through my maid." So she gives Hagar to Abram as a concubine, and soon after Hagar conceives. But while Hagar is pregnant, pride divides the home, and Sarah drives her out into the desert. But by a desert spring, the angel of the Lord finds her and tells her, "Return to your mistress, for I will greatly multiply your descendants." When born, the child is named Ishmael, which means God hears. By this time, Abraham is 96 years old, and the hope of having a child with Sarah is fading. 13 years later, God appears again. "I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be blameless." Abram bows low, and God changed his name from Abram to Abraham, meaning father of many nations, and he changed Sarai's name to Sarah, meaning princess. The covenant is sealed in circumcision, a mark of faith cut into flesh, eternal and personal. The stars Abraham once counted now live in the promise of a single unborn child and the God who keeps his word. One hot afternoon, as Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent near the great oaks of Mamre, he looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. At once, he hurried to greet them, bowing low to the ground and offering water to wash their feet and food to refresh them. These visitors were no ordinary men, they were messengers of the Lord. As they ate under the shade of the tree, one of them turned to Abraham and said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." From inside the tent, Sarah was listening. She laughed quietly to herself, for she and Abraham were very old, and the thought of bearing a child seemed impossible. But the visitor replied, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Before departing, the Lord reveals his purpose to destroy Sodom and the surrounding cities because of their wickedness. In compassion for the people of the cities, Abraham dares to speak, humble yet bold. "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous within the city? 40, 20, 10? Each question falls like a trembling heartbeat between heaven and earth. And the Lord replies with calm mercy, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." The wind passes over the hills. The conversation ends, judgment delayed by compassion, a single man's intercession echoing in the silence of God. But unfortunately, not even 10 were found blameless, so in the evening, the messengers who had spoken to Abraham reached Sodom. Lot welcomes them into his home, but the men of Sodom surround the house, wanting to abuse and kill the visitors. To enable Lot and his family to escape safely and as a punishment for their wickedness, the messengers of God caused the mob to go blind. At the same time telling Lot and his family they must leave as the cities were about to be destroyed. At dawn, Lot hesitates. The angels seize his hand and lead him out, mercy pulling him and his wife and daughters from judgment. "Do not look back," they warn. Then fire and brimstone fall from heaven. The plain becomes a sea of smoke. But foolishly Lot's wife turns and looks back, and immediately becomes a pillar of salt. 25 years or so later, When Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, the impossible happened. The Lord visited Sarah as he had promised, and she had a son. They named him Isaac, which means laughter, because Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." Isaac's birth was a miracle, a clear sign that God keeps his word. This boy was the child of promise, the one through whom God's blessing would come. Abraham and Sarah loved him dearly. Every smile, every step, every word reminded them that nothing is too hard for the Lord. The tents of Abraham are alive with the laughter of Isaac, the son of promise, now a young child. Sarah's joy, once barren and bitter, has turned to life. Yet, as the boy grows, shadows stir in her heart. She watches Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking Isaac in play, her eyes tighten, the old wound reopens. That evening, Sarah spoke to Abraham with a trembling voice, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son. The son of the slave shall not be heir with my son Isaac." The words pierce Abraham's soul. He turns from her. Gazing into the desert night, the laughter of both sons echoing faintly behind him. His heart is torn between mercy and obedience. Then God's voice comes softly in the silence, "Let it not be grievous in your sight because of the lad and because of your bondwoman. In Isaac shall your seed be called. But also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation because he is your seed." At dawn, Abraham rises early. He prepares a small pack containing bread and a skin of water and places it upon Hagar's shoulder. No words can heal the ache as she takes the boy's hand and walks away, their figures shrinking against the rising sun. Hours turn to days. Eventually, the food and water run out. So Hagar places Ishmael beneath a desert shrub and withdraws. Unable to watch him die, she weeps, her voice breaking in the still air. And then a voice calls from heaven. "What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the boy, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." Her eyes are open, and she sees a well glimmering in the heat. She runs, fills the skin, and gives the boy water. The desert once again becomes a place of mercy, not death. Years passed, and Isaac grew. Then one day, God spoke to Abraham to test him. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will show you." The words must have shaken Abraham to the core. Offer Isaac, the miracle child, the one God had promised. How could the promises continue if Isaac was gone? And yet, Abraham did not argue. Somehow, he trusted that God would still keep his word, even if it meant raising Isaac from the dead. So early the next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey and set out. He took 2 servants with him, and Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and set off for Mount Moriah. They traveled for 3 days. Each step gave Abraham time to think, to feel the weight of what God had asked. Yet still he kept walking, each step one closer to that horrific moment that he would have to sacrifice his only son. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the mountain in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Notice his words. "We will come back." Abraham's faith was unshaken. He placed the wood for the offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. The two of them walked on together. As they climbed, Isaac spoke. "Father." "Yes, my son. We have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham's answer was full of faith. "My son, God himself will provide the lamb." When they reached the place, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood. With trembling hands, he bound Isaac and laid him on the altar. Isaac trusted his father. The scriptures give no hint of resistance. Then in absolute faith, Abraham reached out his hand, took the knife and lifted his arm to slay his son. But in that moment, the angel of the Lord called from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not harm him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham lowered the knife, overwhelmed with relief. He looked up, and there in a thicket was a ram caught by its horns. So Abraham took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. We are told in Genesis 22 verse 14 that Abraham called that place "the Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." Then the angel of the Lord spoke again, "Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I swear by myself that I will bless you. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me." And so Abraham and Isaac returned to the servants and went back home together. Years pass. Sarah dies at 127 years old in Hebron, and Abraham mourns for her and purchases the cave of Machpelah from Ephron the Hittite as a family burial place, the only portion of the promised land he owned during his lifetime. After Sarah's death, Abraham, 137 years old, now sends his chief servant to his homeland in Mesopotamia to find a wife for Isaac from among his distant family. The story of Abraham is one of the most moving in the Bible. It shows Abraham's complete trust in God. He obeyed, even when he didn't understand. He believed that God would keep his promises, even if it required raising Isaac from the dead. It also points forward to something far greater. Isaac was spared, but many centuries later, God didn't spare his only son, the promised offspring of Abraham, who willingly gave his life as the sacrifice for sin. This time, there was no ram caught in the thicket on Mount Moriah. But Mount Moriah, now called the Temple Mount, is the very place Jesus will rule from, when he returns to set up his kingdom. God gave us his greatest gift, his beloved Son. He was offered on the cross so that every nation might share in God's blessing. Then God raised him from the dead, for he had never sinned and therefore did not deserve the death that came upon all through Adam. Abraham's faith was tested, and he obeyed. God's faithfulness was proved, and he provided. The story of Abraham calls us to trust God even when we cannot see the way forward, believing that he will always keep his promises. Abraham and Isaac in the golden thread. The story of Abraham and Isaac isn't just about one father and son. It is part of the great plan of God that runs all the way through the Bible, the golden thread. Isaac's birth was a miracle. Abraham and Sarah were far too old to have children, but God gave them a son anyway. Isaac's birth shows that God's promises depend on his power, not human strength. This points forward to another miraculous birth, the birth of Jesus, born of a virgin by the power of God. Both Isaac and Jesus were born because of God's promise, not human ability. When God spoke to Abraham, he said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love." That language points us to Jesus, God's only son, the son whom he loves. Just as Abraham was asked to give up Isaac, God did not spare Jesus but gave him up for us all. Isaac carried the wood on his shoulders as he climbed the mountain. Centuries later, Jesus carried his cross to the hill of Calvary. Isaac asked, "Where is the lamb?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide." And God did just that, not just the ram caught in the thicket, but ultimately Jesus, the true Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. On Mount Moriah, God provided a ram to die in Isaac's place. Isaac was spared, and the ram became the substitute. This is a powerful picture of salvation. Jesus died as our substitute. He gave his life so that we might live. In both cases, God provided a substitute, a ram for Isaac and Jesus for us. Because Abraham obeyed, God repeated his promise: through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed. That offspring is Christ. In Jesus, the promise to Abraham is fulfilled and blessing flows to every nation, not just to Abraham's family. There's another way to join us on the journey, one that explores in more detail the practical aspects of walking toward God's kingdom. It is our free, multilingual, Bible-based Christianity course, a free 30-lesson video course covering all aspects of the Bible and daily life. And if you have questions about Scripture, there is a multilingual chat system on the website where you can ask any question on scriptural issues. To access any of them, simply visit the website listed below. If we don't yet have videos or the course in your language, please email us at the address shown, telling us what you are interested in and your language, and we will do our best to create them for you. God bless you on your walk to God's kingdom.